Oh my goodness, you guys, hello, welcome. Thank you for being here live because it's way more fun when you are.
Oh yeah,
If you're watching the replay, you're missing out on a good vibe.
it's true.
We have Rob Mack back, and you all, this man is just such a delight. Brad's going to give a proper edification, but we are in the presence of an awesome human doing incredible work in this world, and we all should be so grateful. So thank you for being here. Brad, will you tell everyone who may not know how they don't know, but how if they don't, who Rob is?
I would be more than willing.
That's
That's an inside joke. More than happy to do that. Rob, first, thanks again for being here. And y'all, we're so happy that you're here. Robert Mack is an Ivy League educated positive psychology expert, inspirational speaker, and published author. His work has been endorsed by Oprah, Vanessa Williams, Lisa Nichols, and many others. In addition to serving as celebrity life coach for Famously Single on the E! Network for 2 seasons, Rob also worked as consulting producer and on-camera expert for Mind Your Business on the OWN Network and executive producer and host of Good Morning La La Land on Apple TV and Hulu. That's new. That's exciting. He has been featured on television shows like Good Morning America, The Today Show, CBS Morning Show, and Access Hollywood, and in magazines such as GQ, Self, Health, Cosmopolitan, Well and Good, and Glamour.
And he was also on the Be Until You See It podcast, which,
Yes.
Rob, you helped make it in the top 2%. Thank you very much.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's exciting. That's awesome. I feel like you all are always in the top 2%, though.
True. Anyways,
well, today we're so stoked to have Rob, have you back. And everyone, I know you read all the description and everything, but we're really going to dig into isolation, loneliness in today's virtual world economy, attention economy, and how everything shifting. I'm assuming you're going to talk about the pandemic and the isolation that we all feel, even though we're connected, but we're so not. It's so strange. So what to do about that?
So true. Yeah. It's wild, isn't it? I mean, so many people are lonely these days.
I know. It's actually, I think it's been going on for even pre-pandemic. I think your research would show that anyways, but like
social media, all of the stats about social media is that it makes you lonelier.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So I was thinking that maybe I'd start with just a little quick crash course on sort of what positive psychology is, and just to provide some context for the conversation. Would that work?
Yeah, because what I noticed, and I wanted to ask you about this, is you used to define yourself as a happiness coach.
Yes, I still do. I still, for sure, call myself a happiness coach. The interesting thing is, when I started my work as a happiness coach like 20 years ago, nobody called me because they were unhappy, or at least they didn't admit it. They'd call me because they didn't have a girlfriend, they didn't have a boyfriend, they couldn't find any dates, or they did have a husband or wife and they hated the husband or wife, or the husband or wife cheated on them. So they called me with like dating, love, and relationship issues, despite being a happiness coach. And I always thought that was so odd. I'm like, why do you call me? I don't know anything about these things. I just know about happiness. So wild.
That's really funny. So yeah, just a slight change in verbiage. Are you now getting clients that make more sense for that?
Not so much. I still get the same, you get some of the same spectrum of problems. There are finite problems. I think number of problems in the world, but also finite solutions, at least from my perspective. So I pretty much get same folks asking very similar questions. Not much has changed in 20 years. The science has changed a little. My approach has changed quite a bit. But at the end of the day, most of us still just want to be happy. And we often call the lack of happiness loneliness. Sometimes we call it stress, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. We call it a number of things, but really all falls under the umbrella of just wanting to be happy.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
that hits home.
Yeah.
Let's go into our crash course.
Yeah.
So, the way I put it is, nothing you think will make you happy, right? So nothing you think will make you happy. When I was a small child, I was obsessed with one question, and that was like, why am I here? And I asked that, I guess, to all of us, is why are you here? Not, of course, in this incredible, talk and seminar and conversation, but why are you here on the planet? We know that all of us hopefully dragged you here, cooking and screaming, to the conversation. but why are you here on the planet? That question used to sort of, I was tortured with that question. And I know I tortured my mom and my dad with that question for many, many years, starting at a very young age. I always thought I'd eventually find.
I told you to ask the pastor.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And I
That's
never
what
really,
they were like, go ask that guy.
exactly. It was just wild. So I never really figured that out. Certainly not when I was small. And I always thought that, it would be friends, or it'd be eventually a girlfriend, hopefully, maybe performing well academically or athletically. And I ended up doing, most of those things adequately well. I was salutatorian in my high school class, and I was also most shy in my high school class. So I suffered with a lot of sort of isolation and loneliness over the years. But the stress, anxiety, and depression that I experienced at a very young age never went away in the ways that I thought it would. None of those things that you traditionally think will solve for unhappiness ever did solve for it. Got to a place, as you all know, where I was so depressed that I became suicidal and decided to do some research. Went to the kitchen, had a steak knife, and dug it into my wrist. And still have the suicide test marks to this day. And something very strange and unexpected happened, which is that for no good reason, without anything in my external conditions or circumstances changing at all, I felt a level of peace and happiness and love and connectedness that I had never experienced before in my life. And I couldn't understand why, because nothing in my external life had changed at all. So I decided to put the suicide off for at least 10 minutes at that time. Wasn't a very long time. Now it's laughable. But in that period of time, I began doing a different kind of research. And that research was all about happiness. And before long, I found this entire science of positive psychology, applied positive psychology. It's only at this point about 18, 19 years old. And it tells us what leads to a happy life and what a happy life leads to. So in other words, the causes and effects are causes and consequences of happiness. So I just want to share that real quick, what that sort of looks like and sounds like. So
yeah, is that a chicken and the egg scenario right there?
It does sound like that, doesn't it? It's like, which one comes first? Does the great life come first, or does the happiness come first? Does the happy conditions come first, or does the happy consciousness come first? And of course, science has a lot to say about that, and I probably have just as much to say, which is that, so most of us who have lived long enough know success doesn't lead to happiness.
No.
Right? It's a hard thing to understand. It's really hard to embrace that, right? To fully accept it. Intellectually, it sounds good, but we don't mostly live that way. So success doesn't lead to happiness. It's the first sort of insight they share. And despite success not leading to happiness, happiness does lead to success, right? So in other words, happy people experience the best that life has to offer, and they experience a lazier, more enjoyable, more effective, more efficacious path to that success. So in other words, happy people make more money over the course of their entire lifetime than unhappy people. They make about $600,000 to $700,000 on average, more than unhappy people. They live longer. They live about 6 to 7 years longer than unhappy people. They get married earlier, stay married longer, and are happier in all the relationships, whether they're married or not, because clearly it's not about marriage. It is about love and happiness, right? They experience less job burnout, surprisingly enough. They also, and this is for those folks who think, well, happy people are so selfish. I get that. But interestingly enough, happy people are more loving. They're more charitable. They're more kind. They donate more time, energy, money, and blood to other people and to social causes, right? So they're more altruistic, and they're actually more unselfish in the end. Happiness also improves the health of your body, right, and of your mind. And so the happier you are, in other words, the more successful life you live, no matter how you define success, because it improves the conditions, circumstances of your world, your relationships, your finances, your body, and your spirit, of course. Right? So that's important to remember. I'll say one more thing here, and that is that, so success doesn't lead to happiness. Happiness does lead to success. We could go further than that, and I would argue that happiness is the greatest success. In other words, the only reason we want to achieve, accomplish, or acquire anything in the entire world, or anybody, if we're talking about acquisition, then it's because we think we'll feel better for having it or them. We're ultimately after a feeling. And if we didn't think we'd feel better as a result of getting money, spending money, saving money, donating money, getting into a relationship, breaking up from that relationship, having kids, not having kids, we wouldn't care about those things at all. So ultimately, happiness is the greatest success. It's also the greatest wealth. It's also the greatest health. It's also the greatest wisdom, because
It also sounds like the greatest driver.
yes, dude, that's exactly right. Right. So the way I sometimes put it is happiness is the greatest wealth, but it also leads to wealth. Happiness is the greatest love because it also leads to love. Right. So again, happy people get married earlier, stay married longer, and happy to all the relationships, whether they're married or not. Happy people are also rated as more attractive than their unhappy counterparts. Right. So all the science is saying one thing, essentially, that whatever it is you think you want, you have to find a way to get happy without those things or people you think you want. Right.
Science is
Yes.
basically saying, no worries,
Yes. Right. Yes.
be happy.
Yes. Exactly. Right. So that's part of the challenge and the opportunity that we all face today, which is that none of the things that we think will make us happy ultimately do, not for very long, if at all. And in order to get those things more easily, whatever they are, including a relationship, you got to find a way to get happy without all the stuff you want or without all the people you want in order to get those things more easily, but also in order to be happy, period. So the challenge with loneliness, like everything else in isolation, is that we sometimes put the cart before the horse. And it seems so obvious that if we can just find someone to love us or some people to love us in the way that we want to be loved, we'll eventually shore up this emptiness and this void in our heart, in our soul, that we call loneliness, and the problem of loneliness will be solved. But we know that's not the case. That's not true at all, right? So let's just dive into that a little bit. First of all, does that make sense?
Yeah, to me it does, because I think like, well, I see all the time people, when I get more clients, then it'll be better. When I make more money, it'll be better. When I get up, like with my girlfriends, like, well, when I get a partner, I'll be happy. I'm like,
Or once I finish my certification, I'll be happy.
like it's like there's like an added pressure to the thing that they want to provide the feeling that they want to have. And what you're saying is, well, we actually have to solve the feeling before we have it.
Boom. I mean, like an expert and a veteran that you are. That's so dope. Yes, that's exactly it, right? Yeah. So we're ultimately after a feeling. And strangely enough, it's kind of, and it can be frustrating. I know it was frustrating for me because I was like, wait, you mean to tell me it's kind of like going to the bank for a loan and not having any assets? And they're like, you need assets to get a loan. And you're like, but how am I going to get the assets without the loan? That's often what it feels like with this happiness thing. It's like, I want to be successful, or I want to be in a relationship, or I want to not feel lonely or experience loneliness. You're telling me that I have to find a way to feel something first in order to achieve the conditions or circumstance later. Yes, that's absolutely right. Right. So if you want a happy partner, you've got to find a way to get happy without the partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just
I think you should say that again.
Yeah. So if you want a happy partner, you have to find a way to be happy without a partner.
Yeah.
Right. Generally, happy people are so happy they're not willing to compromise their happiness to be with an unhappy person for very long. Oof.
Right.
Big. Right. Big. Another way of saying it is happiness is the price you pay for success in love, in relationships, for health, for longevity. It's not a bad price to pay. Yeah. Yeah. So we can dive into loneliness a little bit. And, the one thing I want to say first about loneliness is that, yes, it's been on the rise for a long time. Despite being more connected technologically, we feel more disconnected psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, right? So that's problematic for most of us. But it also is highly insightful and indicative of what doesn't work. Being more connected technologically, being more connected with people, even sometimes in person, doesn't solve for the primary problem, the real problem, which is the loneliness itself. And loneliness is different from aloneness. So let's just talk about that a little bit. So aloneness is the objective experience of being alone. Okay, so maybe there's nobody around you. Maybe you feel like maybe you don't have any friends. You have very few social connections. That's aloneness. Loneliness is the subjective experience of that aloneness. So in other words, we've all had this experience where you are all by yourself and not feeling lonely at all. You're all alone, but not lonely. We've also had the other experience where you're surrounded by people, right? You're not alone, and yet you feel lonely. Maybe you're in a relationship, or maybe you're in a crowd of people, or maybe you're with friends or family members, and yet you feel lonely. So it's important to tease this out, that aloneness does not equal or equate to loneliness, and loneliness does not equal or equate to aloneness, and one doesn't have to lead to the other. So aloneness doesn't necessarily or need to ever lead to loneliness. Although I will tell you that the lonelier you are, the tougher it gets, because when you're lonely, it's harder for you to get along or to connect with people. People kind of feel that energy, right? We feel that sort of desperate, needy, attached kind of energy. And it's harder for, for other people to get along with you and for you to get along with other people. So I'll stop there for a second and make sure that this is like sinking in.
Yeah, no,
So aloneness versus loneliness.
That's right.
Because as a high functioning gregarious introvert, I really
Yeah.
and I do not ever feel lonely. But
That's like literally that's like it's incredible to me, because that's not how I am at all.
Really? Are you
No.
the exact opposite?
Oh yeah.
During the pandemic, because I like needed to like be alone, right? I was like loving life. I was like, this is amazing. He was calling people. He went to high school and junior high. I was like, hey, how's it going? Like, he just needed to be around people, and he couldn't go work at the bar, and he couldn't go to the coffee shop. And like, there was no place for him to like connect with people except for me. And I'm like, so we can't connect 12 hours a day. Like, that's just not going to work here. So, but I also think like, because I'm like thinking about, our teachers and our studio owners, I know for a fact, sometimes they'll see like 10 clients in a day, 12 clients a day, and they'll feel lonely, but they're not alone. They don't feel connected to the people that are coming in for a variety of reasons. They're their clients or whatever, or they're in communities, but they don't feel like they're in the community. So they're surrounding themselves with people, but they're not connecting with them. And so therefore they feel, and you're right, it starts to feel even more isolating because you're like, what's wrong with me? I'm not connecting with these people. Nobody likes me.
Yeah, I think it's very like, so it always makes me think back to middle school and high school, when I would go to an event, and I would be surrounded by all these people, and I was like, none of these people know who I am.
Yes.
And that doesn't necessarily change, when I worked in corporate, and I worked in a company of like 100 people. I would be in the office, and like some of us were on the same page because we were working on the same project, and there was like a lot of, at least we kind of knew each other, but like most of the people didn't even know that I was doing music, and that was like why I was in LA.
You were getting divorced.
Yeah, in fact, my team didn't know that I was married before. Like, I did not share any of that information with them. And it definitely was funny. Like, we were there to do a mission. And so, but it made it very lonely. I would go eat my lunch by myself,
So how did you solve for that?
Well, I definitely, I changed who I was working for. Because the environment was cultivated by the man at the top, and it wasn't a great environment. And I think that was like hugely oppressive for everyone in the space. When I removed myself from that, being around that all the time, it changed. It gave me a different perspective, and I was like, oh yeah, I don't actually want to be around these people, even though some of them I love dearly, but this sucks. I would love to be with people that I want to connect with. So
yes.
That was, yeah.
And just to be clear, that's the first step, right? I mean, the first step is do what you can, reach for the low-hanging fruit. We're going to talk more about sort of solving for it. That's loneliness challenge, but it's clear. Some folks, some people, some environments, some social circles will lead you to feel more lonely, and other circles and people and environments and jobs won't lead you to feel that way. You'll feel less lonely. right? So you always want to reach for the low-hanging fruit. If there are things that you can do to change the folks that you're connecting with consistently or the environment that you're in, by all means, you want to do that, right? And so, but what we often find with so many people, different from you, is that they change the environment so it's different faces and different places, but it's the same old experience of loneliness, right?
Sure.
And there's a way of experiencing the world and other people and ourselves that can be indicative of almost a lonely perspective on life in the world. And part of it is a lack, sort of, we call it a lack consciousness, or just a way of looking at the world and ourselves and our lives. And, loneliness is a lack, but it's not a lack of other people. It's often a lack of our own presence. That's one way of putting it. Or it is a lack of connection, but it's not a lack of connection always or necessarily or even mostly with other people. It's often a lack of connection with and through and for to ourselves, right? So even though it looks like an absence, the absence isn't really mostly an absence of the other. It's the absence of a true connection with ourselves. Important recognition to have. And that doesn't mean that, like you said, there are different kinds, sort of almost flavors of loneliness. So you certainly want to do what you can to change your social circle and situation. But ultimately, it's a way of looking at ourselves and other people in our lives that's for, ultimately very lackful.
Yeah, I love that. I think like that's so great. The idea of like first go with the low hanging fruit. Like if you're feeling lonely, you're not feeling connected, like try switching the people, like the things that are easy to switch around you. And if it's still lonely, then there's probably some more inward work that we have to do. And that resonates a lot with me because I remember, I tell this story a lot. So if y'all have heard this, sorry, but here you go. I didn't feel like I belonged where I grew up. And if you talk to anyone, they're like, she has tons of friends. Like I have tons of friends, but I just didn't feel like I belonged. And so I was around people, but I didn't really connect with them. And then I went to college and I really didn't feel like I belonged there. And then the friends that I did make, they all moved away. So here I was like, I'm living in the same town for 5 years and I don't have any friends and I don't feel like I belong here. And then when I went to my first Pilates class and I was like, I just went because I wanted to make a friend. That was the first time I felt like I belonged in my body. And that made it was such a weird thing because I couldn't pin it. Like I didn't go, oh, this is why I don't feel like I belong. But I felt like I need to be in this room as many times as I can because I feel the best here. And then over time, I realized why that was. And now I can like look back and go, oh, that's why I craved that. But I think it's interesting. We can change the people, we can change the scenes, but if we don't change us, then we're not gonna have a different result.
Absolutely. I worked as a spiritual counselor and teacher for a while in the addiction, rehab world, and of course, there's a term, a phrase that we used often, which was pulling a geographic. You can't just pull a geographic and think that or expect that your whole life will change, a positive direction as a result of that. Yes, for sure, move out of that city, move out of that job, move out of that social circle, and also move out of that perspective or mindset that continues to recreate the same social circle, the same job, the same relationship in the next city or with the next person or the next company kind of thing, right? So you're absolutely right about that. It's sort of multiple levels and layers. But yeah, start with the low-hanging fruit sort of first and foremost. The other thing you said, which is just so insightful, I just love talking to you too so much. Like, it's like we sometimes will change or pull geographic, and you'll find a place or space or activities that just resonate with you so much more deeply. And it'll feel like your people, like your tribe. And that's phenomenal. We love that. And we'll then attribute this new feeling of connectedness and peace and joy to the activity or to the tribe, when the truth is those folks in that environment and activity was really great at encouraging us to look at and focus on the best within ourselves, with other people, and within the world. And we've practiced that because we go back to that activity, go back to that social circle. So we've practiced that sort of vibe and that way of seeing things or even talking about things for long enough that it becomes a habit. So we know in about 22 to 66 days, if you practice something long enough, it starts to become a habit, which means that you do it automatically because your brain rewires itself to do it automatically and easily and effortlessly. And so what's interesting about that is that we want to use everything we can as sort of props or encouragement to begin to think about ourselves and each other and the world in ways that are increasingly constructive. Sometimes I call it positive, but constructive is probably better, in ways that are increasingly constructive. And when you've done that long enough, it just begins to work like an algorithm. And so you start seeing connection and joy and peace and love everywhere. And you're like, wow, what happened? I went to this yoga class where I changed my job, or I changed the relationship. Yes, that's a huge part of it. But the other part of it is like, for finally sort of like got out of your own way and you began practicing a way of thinking and talking about your life and the world in such a way that it was much more constructive to what you wanted to feel or experience more often.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're like, yes, because some people will attribute, like, they got let's say they get a new job at a studio, and and the environment supports them being their best self, but they attribute that studio did it. So then all of a sudden, if the studio changes or their schedule changes there, or something happens there, they take it in a different way, when really the studio is just a really good petri dish for them to cultivate who they really wanted to be.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's something that we see with happiness or unhappiness consistently, which is that we attribute the other person, place, or thing with or for our happiness. So we attribute our happiness to that other person, place, or thing. And then when that person, place, or thing goes away or changes, we're convinced that yes, the happiness and peace and the love and connection all went away with them. And what's so easy to forget is that all those feelings, whether it's peace or love or connection, that all comes through you. And yes, things and people and places can encourage you to think and practice a way of seeing things that makes it easier to feel the inherent or innate peace, love, and joy that exists within you at all times. But the other person, place, or thing isn't ever the source of those feelings. It's not the source of that experience. You're the source of that experience. And that's why, one day, the person who makes you so happy, Tuesday, and on Wednesday, they make you miserable. It's like, I thought the person was the source of my happiness. What happened? Well, they're clearly not, right? I mean, the person is the same. You've changed, right? Or not changed, but you've seen the person in a different way. So it's the sort of that's important to remember, which is that anytime you point a finger at somebody or something else and say either you are my happiness or you are my unhappiness, you've literally rendered yourself powerless to do anything about it, right? You've outsourced how you feel.
I love that. What I took away is, like, y'all have to take a little bit more credit for
Yes.
the happiness that you're experiencing and the goodness that you're feeling and the connections that you're making, as opposed to giving all the credit to the other person or the other thing. Like, you have to actually,
or the experience or the environment.
like, you actually have to go, oh wow, I showed up the way I really wanted to in this moment. And then you could do some reflection of, like, what was it about this moment that allowed me to do that? But you actually get to have a little bit more credit for being your happy self, your most connected self.
You just nailed it. And in fact, I would lean in on that fully and say, take complete responsibility for how you feel. If you outsource even 5% of how you feel to somebody or something else, you've literally given 5% of your power away. Right. So I don't want to give any of my power away. I don't want to give any of my happiness away. I can, say, hey, I really would have preferred that person not rob me. I could have really preferred these experiences not happening. But I can also realize and recognize that I still have power to think about it in a way that I can either find peace in or acceptance in, take a lesson from. But in some way or the other, I feel like it's always possible for us to see other people, places, and things as trainers, kind of, for unconditional peace and unconditional happiness and unconditional self-love and unconditional love. Like, they're personal trainers for that. They're all everything and everybody is pointing us back to ourselves, essentially, especially when they disappoint us, and they're saying, you are responsible for your happiness. It is your pleasure and your privilege to feel connection or to feel love or to feel happiness or to feel whatever it is you want to feel. Right. That's an important message. I just love you sharing that. Positive psychologists have even come up with the happiness formula. And the short of it is that at very, very worst, meaning the number is probably even smaller than this, only 10% of your happiness is due to circumstances and conditions. I would go further than that, because I know plenty of people that have lived in abject poverty and had some of the most traumatic experiences happen ever. And they're some of the happiest people ever.
Yeah.
And I also know people, and I'd say that the people in my practice who I strangely and oddly and ironically are most concerned about are the folks who live perfectly charmed lives and are deeply, truly miserable and suicidal. And yet their life is filled with people who love them and care about them and tons of money and lots of power and success and fame. It's mind blowing, right? So it's important to remember that happiness is completely and ultimately within your hands, and that includes your experience of love.
I'm so glad. First off, that I'm glad you drew those contrasts between the extremes, because I was thinking about being in Cambodia and seeing people who live in a hut and literally and they're smiling and happy and welcoming, and they're so excited to show you their world, and it's a floor. I didn't think about the other extreme, but you're totally right. People who have it all and they're completely miserable. But you said something. Very specific, like two parts of the conversation ago. You said that happiness is a way of thinking.
Yeah, so that takes us to the sort of next stage. So in the beginning of kind of like our happiness journey, it's mostly about, acquiring things, achieving things, accomplishing things. And we're convinced those things will make us happy. And then you accomplish some things and you realize, oh gosh, that faded so fast, or it wasn't what I expected. It was so anticlimactic, or it turned out to be something horrible in the end. So we always have that experience. And so you kind of graduate from that. You still want to achieve and accomplish and acquire because it's fun and it gives you some direction in life for sure. Why not? But then you graduate and you say, okay, it's, happiness and connectedness and love is not mostly or only about extracting love from conditions and circumstances, because they don't love you back always. They don't provide the happiness you always want for very long. And it's not even about other people. So that's, you sort of graduate and say, well, it's about relationships. Well, that's partly true. But if you notice the same person that made you happy one day makes you miserable the next, or the same person that you felt so much love for, you don't feel so much love for the next. And so you realize, okay, this is an unreliable source of happiness and of love, other people and outer conditions. So then you sort of graduate and say, well, happiness then and connectedness or love then must be a state of mind. And that's true. It's the sort of next stage or next chapter in your sort of happiness journey. And as you go there, you quickly discover that it is so much better to focus on the happy aspects or the positive aspects or the aspects that you love within yourself and other people in the world, rather than focusing on the unhappy or unloving or unlovable aspects within yourself, other people in the world. It just feels so much better. And it doesn't only feel better, but when you feel better, you do better and you become more attractive, right? All of a sudden, people want to spend more time with you because you're not calling them out on nonsense, or you're not complaining or focusing on the worst in them. So it does improve your life. And you eventually get to a place where even that isn't fully feeling that hole or void or emptiness in your soul. And sometimes you feel anxiety underneath there. You still feel loneliness underneath that. So we graduate to another sort of chapter and adventure in this journey. But before I go, I just want to stop there before I go there, because I want to make sure that everybody understands that, the point here is it's impossible to feel lonely if you're focusing on the things and the people, or the things about the people that you love. Okay, you can only feel lonely if you focus on those elements that are lonely, right? Another way to say it is, it's impossible to be unhappy unless you focus on the unhappiest parts and pieces and traits within yourself and other people in the world. Okay, so there's a great quote which I love, which is, the law of flotation wasn't discovered by contemplating the sinking of things. In other words, happiness is not found or felt by focusing on the unhappiness of things. Love or connection isn't found or felt by focusing on the lovelessness or loneliness of things. You just cannot get east by going west. You cannot get up by going down in this particular situation. But we all try that. We think, oh, there's this thing about Rob, or this thing about Leslie, or any of us that I just don't like. And I'm just going to focus on it in an effort to solve it. And it's very understandable and normal and human. But the problem is you very quickly become an expert in problems. You become an expert in the unhappiness. And you actually then begin to find increasing reasons for why you should be unhappy or for why you should be lonely. And so you begin building a case against happiness and against love and connection.
Right. Like it's a whole thing. Like when you're running late, then you notice everyone who's cutting you off. You notice how little parking there is. You notice
hit every red light.
You hit and you just get, and you're like, and this red light, and I'm hitting this red light. This happened to you the other day, and I was like, are you gonna call out every red light we're about to hit right now? Like this choice.
It was like 6 in a row. I was like, are you serious? Are you serious right now?
I was laughing so hard because I knew what he was doing. I was like, we were running late. There's like we dropped something on the way out, then it just became this like thing, right? And so and it and I was like, I think I was like, look, free parking.
Yeah, you said we're gonna come around this corner and there's gonna be a parking spot.
Yeah, because well, first of all, because I'm on this mission to like think about the things that I'm wanting to actually have, not the things that I don't want to have and how much I don't want to have them. And so I'm like, because I was starting to just feel a little bit like lonely is the wrong word, but I was freaking miserable. Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm miserable because I'm focused on everything that's going wrong. Like I'm not focused on what's going right.
You nailed it. You just cannot expect to feel right or be right by focusing on everything that's going wrong. Look, for me, it's always like kind of hilarious because I'm like, oh gosh, like it's taken me 20 years to really appreciate how simple that is, but profound, which is like, you just can't be happy by focusing on all that unhappy stuff, Rob. Like hello, like why wasn't that obvious like 20 years ago? But it wasn't.
But it also seems so gimmicky though. Like this goes back to my joke. Don't worry, be happy song. You know, like just be it. Yes. Just be happy, right? And you be happy by focusing on the positive. It sounds like a gimmick.
So good. So did you want to say something like that?
Well, I was just going to say, like, it's like for people who we coach, it's like when they're focusing on how many clients have canceled this week instead of focusing on the new client inquiries that they got. Like you know, like you can, if you focus on all the clients that canceled this week, you are not going to be able to see that there's this positive thing over here. But if you focus on that, then you're reticulate the RAC. I can't say the words. Yeah. We'll see. Oh my God, look at all this good stuff that's happening, right? So it is part of training our brain. Yeah.
Oh, don't be lonely. I'm trying to see it.
It reminds me of a Dr. Seuss quote. What was it? Don't be sad it happened. Don't be sad it's over. Be glad it happened, kind of thing. And it always felt like gimmicky. I will say this. So to that point, and it's a very, very good valid point. A few things. So first, this is why it's so important to tell a better feeling story. That's what we're really talking about, is telling a better feeling story based in truth. Based in truth. If it's not believable, you won't feel better as a result, and therefore it won't be effective. So in other words, let's say it's raining. We could say it's a bad day. Okay, that's not the better feeling story. It's a bad day. The better feeling but truthful story is, gosh, I love sunshine. I really love when it's sunny out, and I'm going to appreciate how sunny it is. When it's sunny again, I'm going to appreciate it even more, right? So it's the sour or the sour that makes the sweet so much sweeter, kind of thing, right? So yes,
yeah, this is cool, man. I was just thinking about this. I can't, and I like last week, and I called it reframing, because the circumstances are still the circumstances, but it's like I follow a lot of politics, and I'm always in awe at the audacity of the reframe that a politician will make. I'm like, this asshole didn't even answer the question and like completely skipped it and made this positive spin that serves his own purpose. And it's incredible. It's such an incredible skill that they have to do that. And they do it so well, so fast in the moment, in a conversation or an interview. And I was like, I want that skill in my life, not necessarily to manipulate the way that a lot of them use that, but like, how amazing would it be, just like you said, God, I wish it wasn't raining, or wow, I love sunshine and I can't wait for it to be sunny. When it is, I'm going to appreciate it even more.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Well, I think the key that you said is like, it's got to be truthful, because our brain doesn't like dissonance. It's not like if you hate the rain and you're like, I love the rain, you're going to be like, I'm an asshole. Like you're not, you know what I mean? But like, I do like that. Like, I can't wait when the sunshine is back. I'm going to love it even more. Like, I think that's it. And those are training ourselves to have that thought is a little trickier. We y'all, if you were here with Jenny Schatzel 2 webinars ago, she said our first thoughts of what's ingrained, and our second thought is the person we want to be. So I think like, I'm just going to bring that in here. It's like we're all going to have these thoughts that are for the lonely side or the unhappiness side or woe is me side. And so, but don't get caught up in that first thought. Just like make sure that the next thought is the person you're wanting to be. So, okay, let me find the happiness in this. Like, what can I do right now? Do you know, like, am I on the right track there with that?
You nailed it. The way I think about it is, and I love that frame. That's just beautiful, like really eloquent. The first thought that enters your control really isn't with the first thought that enters. It's with the second thought that you entertain. So, the first thought comes to mind almost automatically without your awareness at all. And it's like, gosh, I hate that person. They suck, or whatever it is. Right. And it's then the question is, but am I going to continue entertaining that story? I'm going to continue feeding and fueling that story, or am I going to say, gosh, they remind me so much of what I want to be, like of what I want to be. Right. So maybe there's an in-between thought, which is they remind me of what I don't want to be, which then inspires me to remember what I do want to be, or how I do want to be, or what I want to be like.
Oh, that's so funny. I just realized I didn't put that together till right now. I worked in such a negative space before, and people would always say, how can you still work there? And my answer was, I am learning everything not to do when running a company.
That's a rich experience. I love that. You already do it. I mean, most of us don't even realize it. We're doing it all the time anyway. And when you're intentional about it and you do it because you simply want to feel better, and then you trust when you feel better, life will go better based on all the science, also based on our personal experiences. I'll feel better and then life will go better. I'll feel better and then I'll do better. And just setting some intention behind it. Like right? I mean, you all are really phenomenal at it. Let's be honest, and it's
I wish that one was intentional. It just kind of
no.
It was a little bit of my cynicism.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah. Well, a little cynicism helps. Quite frankly, in the beginning, it's fine. Like better to lean into cynicism to outright catastrophizing, right? That's up the emotional scale. Cynicism from catastrophizing. So yes, I mean, I love that so much, and you're also right. It's a practice and a skill. When you begin practicing, you need to keep the bar very low. So it's like, and so there's a couple ways to do it, right? So one way is you tell a better feeling based in truth, or better.
I think this is exactly the right moment to bring in a question from Anne Marie.
Yeah, perfect.
Anne Marie said, "What are some tools we can use to connect better to ourselves, to feel that connection inside of us?" And I think that we've kind of come to this place where if happiness comes from focusing on the positivity, what are some tools that we could use to focus on the positivity? How do we catch ourselves? How do we remind ourselves of this?
Yeah, so we'll put it in 4 or 5 buckets. So the first is happy activities, right? So anything that lets you feel tapped into and turned on in the flow state, we want to lean into.
I love it. You always have the best alliteration.
That's with alliteration.
It's so good. It's really, really good. So tapped in,
tuned in,
turned on. Yes.
That's beautiful. Shout out Abraham Hicks. So yes, that number one. Okay. So anything that does that, hopefully healthy things. Then so that's happiness is a activity. Then you just simply talk about happy people or encouraging people or loving people. Just do everything you can to rid yourself of the energy vampires, or at least spend less time, energy, and effort with the energy vampires, more time with the folks who fill up your bucket, okay, that are loving, that are at least aspire to be happy if they're not actually happy. The truth is, when you spend time with people who are unhappy and don't aspire to be happy, they will always pull you down. You will not pull them up. Even the strongest, happiest person will have a hard time pulling up an unhappy person. It doesn't usually go that direction. It's kind of like poison. You put 1 drop of poison in the glass of water, that whole glass of water is now poison. You could try to reverse it where you have a whole bottle of poison. You put 1 drop of water, still poison. Kind of the experience that you want to remember.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
I also being like a drowning victim, so they're literally like instinctually like taking the lifeguard down because they're so the lifeguard's there to save them. So it's kind of like that. We're not, unless you're trained to be a lifeguard and you're actually saving a drowning victim, maybe don't.
You nailed it. Oh, so right. That's exactly right. Exactly. Beautifully put. So yes, that's a perfect metaphor. And then the third piece is, which we've been talking about, which is telling this better feeling story based in truth. We can really just think of it as maybe having more constructive or positive conversations with ourselves and other people. The key there is not to vet every single thought and conversation you have. Instead, just be more sensitive to how you feel. Let how you feel tip you off to the fact that you're going down a path that is likely to make you feel worse and likely to make you do worse, right? So if you can become more sensitive to how you feel, it's like, oh, I feel a little out of sorts. What's going on here? And then you look back at the conversation, or you find yourself in the middle of a conversation with yourself or someone else. That's immediately where you offer up a pattern interrupt. So there are lots of ways to offer up a pattern interrupt. At some point, you'll just be able to pivot and reframe on the fly. It's not a big deal. It's like, okay, we were talking about, something crazy going on. Oh, COVID spiking again, which, it's like, okay. Okay. And we've all been there before, and we've all been okay. We've gotten through it just fine. And I feel like we're in a better position now than ever to be healthy and whatever, right? So you can do it on the fly, maybe a more graduate level. In the beginning, what you often have to do, and a client who did this, he spoke like 2 words of English. I don't even know. I spoke like maybe 1 word of French. I don't even know how he was my client. It was like maybe a session and a half. Okay. And the whole time it was just like, this was before Google Translate. And anyway, all he really understood was bad thought, no. So 6 months later, after we had this session, I was convinced I wanted to get the guy his money back. So 6 months later, I ran into the guy and he said, Rob, and he had a guy with him who was translating. He said, every time I have a negative thought now, or a thought that makes me feel bad, I wear a rubber band. I'm like, you wear a rubber band? He's like, yeah. And whenever the thought, yes, I just snap it and say no. And then I will change my focus and attention to anything or anybody that makes me feel better when I focus on it. And I was like, wow. He's like, I've just practiced that long enough that I don't need to snap it anymore. And I can automatically just pivot. So the whole idea is notice how you feel when you don't feel good, essentially. Change your focus to anything or anybody else that's either positive, hopefully it's engaging and consuming, that's easier to keep your attention. And if not, at least something that's innocuous, something that's neutral. Some therapists will have their clients call out objects in the room, chair, refrigerator, microwave, whatever. But the idea is to interrupt this pattern of thought and feeling.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's a
I love that. That made me think of the movie. I want to say it was called The Accountant.
Oh, it's a great movie. Ben Affleck.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was the one where he had the snap. Matt Damon had one recently too with that too. So you mentioned so the first step to happiness is activity. The second is association. The third is positive conversations.
Yeah, we'll call them conversations with yourself and others. Maybe constructive conversations. Sometimes positive gets people mad or confused. Positive. I don't want to be just positive. It's like, no, it's constructive. It's like, what do you want to feel, achieve, or experience? And how can you talk to yourself and other people so that you increase the likelihood of experiencing and achieving it or feeling it?
Yeah.
The important thing to remember is that just because you're valid in feeling unhappy, or valid in feeling lonely, or valid in feeling whatever you're feeling frustrated, that is not a good reason to continue feeding those feelings. Really important. Okay, it's like, yes, you're all valid.
Your feelings are valid.
Yes,
but that's not permission to just go and like dive on in and like make your bed there.
Yeah, I mean, totally. That's important to remember, because you'll be like, but no, I'm right to be mad. Well, you are, and you're only screwing up your life. The other person clearly doesn't care.
No, you're right. I think it was your good friend Oprah. She was talking about how she was upset at somebody, and she was just really pissed at her. And she saw her across the street walking the opposite direction, and the woman was like laughing and like loving life, and she's over here pissed off, and she's like, she's having a great time, and I'm the one who's suffering, right? And I was like, if Oprah can say that, then we all can hey, it happens, and you have to recognize you being upset at them isn't making their life.
No. It's like, I'm going to drink some poison and hope you die. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. Like, what? No. And you're so right. And also to your point, which I love so much, is like, yes, happiness is the greatest revenge. Like, you want to get really revenge on something. Like, there is nothing better than being happy. People, if somebody really has an issue with you, they want to see you miserable. Like, more than even broke more than even not in a relationship, they want to see you miserable. Because if you're really happy, maybe you're not in a relationship, maybe you don't have any money, but that is like the greatest, sweetest revenge ever. Just to be
That's like a great quote card right there. Happiness is revenge.
It is, though.
I love that. Well, you mentioned there were 2 more steps in the 5 steps.
Yeah, we'll reduce it to 1. It's really 1. So it is essentially, so we talk about sort of the previous one was sort of like positive, constructive thoughts and words. This one is like positive, constructive, no thoughts and no words, right? Mm-hmm. So it took me a long time to find probably the simplest solution, which is like, I don't need to think about shit at all. Like, I don't have to think about anything at all. Like at some point, if like, it's a lot of hard work sometimes, you know, you don't always feel up to thinking positively or constructively or reframing or telling a better story based in truth or seeking out people that are loving and encouraging and happy or doing happy activities. Sometimes you just want to sit there or lie there or walk around with no thought in your mind. And that stillness and silence is perfect peace. It's perfect happiness. And you feel a deep, true connection. So, you know,
I'm so bad at that.
Yeah, we all are. We tend to be.
Oh, yeah.
He has had the doctor literally say, I need you to sit down for lunch and just eat lunch. Like, just eat the lunch. Don't work. Don't listen to a pod. Just sit. And he's like, nothing. Just sit there.
Don't play a video game. Don't listen to a podcast. Just focus on eating my sandwich. What?
What kind of masochist is this doctor?
Yeah. But that is, I think, I don't know. That feels like if like you've reached a level of nirvana, if you can get to constructive, no thoughts, no words.
It's like some sense of meditation, I think.
Yes.
You know, like
you just
if you have a meditation practice, this could fit into that. Or maybe you're focusing on only one thought. You know, like I know in some meditation, people say, focus on the flame. Right? Like imagine a flame and you're just imagining the flame and you're focusing on that and it's eliminating the rest.
Oh, it's so good. You're so right. So you're absolutely right. And this is why the sort of positive constructive thinking is so helpful, because it gets you to become much more one-pointed and single-minded in your focus. It sort of strengthens the mind in a way that prepares it for no mind, for no thought, for no words. You nailed it. So that's usually the preparation. That's why often we can't jump right to, let's say, no thoughts or no mind, as I put it. But when you've practiced that for a while, mind becomes strong enough. What you start to discover too is that we all do this no thought, no mind thing effortlessly when you're in flow state, effortlessly when in ecstasy or orgasm. You do it effortlessly when you're just falling asleep at night. In fact, for 8 hours, depending on whether or not it's dreamless sleep or not, your mind is perfectly quiet, composed, cool, and calm. Which is phenomenally interesting and to notice, just noticing that. Sometimes you find, and this is the value of, let's say, koans, like you hear these things like, what's the sound of one hand clapping? If a tree falls in the forest, does it make any sound? Well, the point isn't to really solve that question. It's to get your mind to be quiet for just a moment, right? So what's the sound of one hand clapping? It's like, or even better, what I do with my clients sometimes, it's like, what's 555,000 times 319? You don't even know where to start. So for that micro moment, your mind is like, what?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So it doesn't feel like anything at first. Like that little micro moment where your mind is quiet doesn't feel like anything at first. But the more you notice those gaps, you begin to find that those gaps are like pregnant. They're like pregnant with like little bundles of joy, is the way I put it sometimes. But you have to spend enough time there to really recognize that those bundles of joy are there. One way to do it is what I call a micro meditation. I think we've talked about that maybe once or twice before, which is like, pretend it's the last breath you'll ever take. Right now, just pretend it's like the last breath you'll ever take. You might have 100 years left. Who knows? We might only have a few seconds left. We never know. So really try to be sincere that this is the last breath you ever take, and try to simply enjoy this one breath as deeply as humanly possible while you let all your thoughts go. So you breathe in through the nose, breathe out of the mouth. The whole idea is just to try and enjoy it as much as humanly possible. If you just do that one micro meditation and you did it as often as you can remember throughout the day, no matter what else you were doing, you'd find that not in very much time, 22 to 66 days, your mind would begin to do it automatically and effortlessly on its own. You find yourself just doing it sometimes. And so you just experience the silence and stillness more consistently.
Yeah, because your brain actually wants that. Like there's the feeling that you have, that joy that you have, that's like a little dopamine high, and it wants that. So it's going to look for more opportunities to take that in. You made that whole deep breath just there made me remember the founder of Soul Cycle, the guy, Tim Ferriss, asked her, like, do you meditate? She's like, I have one meditation. It's 11 seconds long.
Yes.
And I goes, inhale, exhale. And it's it happens to be that the perfect breath is 5.5 seconds in and 5.5 seconds out. How crazy is that? So anyways, you just nailed it. There's science behind that, and your brain will like want to do it more, and you'll have all those little joy moments.
Oh, I love that so much. You know, that makes so much sense because I practice the box breathing that the Navy SEALs do sometimes, right? Like forward, you know, and I've done also the in for 4 and out for 6. And it's interesting. They all end up right there around 10 or 11 or 12. So that's fascinating to know. I didn't know that about 11 seconds.
Yeah. If you read the book Breathe, just for it has it in there. Like, and it's similar. It's about 10 to 11 seconds is kind of like the best thing. And so James Nestor. And then also like what's so incredible is like in Pilates, the first exercise, the 100, it's 10 cycles of breathing, in for 5, out for 5. So it's like in that perfect breath cycle. And even though everyone hates the 100, it's like actually one of the best things we can also do for our bodies. This is really, there's so much in here. I can't believe how the time I just looked at it. So
I was like, what? It's 1 o'clock.
Real quick.
Every time it blows by.
Well, real quick, everyone, toss your takeaways in there. If you have any last minute questions, throw them in.
Thanks for joining us
Rob,
today.
Is there anything else? Because we just kind of like, is there anything else that we need to think about when it comes to being more connected and less isolated?
Yeah, I'd say one thing, it's sort of, I joke about it sometimes, you know, the word alone, ALONE, and the word all one, really just different by one L. You know, so sometimes joke with my friends and family, like, if you don't want to be lonely, focus on the ways in which we're all one, right? It's not alone. That way you won't take an L, quote unquote. But the idea essentially is that our true self is nothing but peace, love, happiness, and light already. Okay. And that true self, the life of us, is the same life of each other. We're all the same one life that we all share. Whatever infinite intelligence hangs the earth on nothing, rotates on its axis and revolves around the sun. Okay, that beats your heart and my heart, and breathes your lungs and my lungs, and has our brains all orchestrated all. We're all that life. We don't have a life, we are life. And the more you can connect with that thoughtless, wordless, faceless, formless experience of peaceful aliveness inside yourself, it doesn't matter how you do it. You can call it the practice of the presence of God. You can call it self-inquiry. You call it meditation, prayer. You call it running, sex, whatever it is that lets you feel that peaceful aliveness that's always within you. And the more you can do that consistently for joy's sake alone, the more connected you'll feel with yourself. And the more connected you'll feel with everybody else too. So another way of saying that is when you find this peaceful aliveness within yourself, you find it with everybody and everything else too. When you find this happiness and harmony within yourself, you find that same happiness and harmony with everybody and everything else, even if and when they don't find it with you. Even if and when they don't find it with you, right? So the challenge is to find that connectedness, that sense of connection within yourself. When you find it, nothing and nobody can take it away from you. They can only enhance it. So that's really ultimately the master key. The more you can practice feeling that peaceful aliveness, you might call it God or source or spirit or just your true self, your higher self, connecting with that, the more quickly and effortlessly and easily and enjoyably you'll see everything in your life begin to unfold in miraculous ways.
Oh, Rob, you always bring me so much joy.
I love you too. You don't even know, man. Just seeing you all makes me so happy. With that,
I was going to say, which means I must be like bringing all the joy here too.
That's right. See, so you just aced the exam. That was the final exam, and you just aced it. Yep. That's right.
I love it.
Amazing.
You're amazing.
Wow, we got some awesome takeaways here.
And since you're in Miami, one of our members, DeAndrea, who is on today, she's got a fly studio in Miami. Just saying. So,
Yeah.
you know, hopefully we'll
Yeah.
see. So here's some takeaways. I know Kelly wrote this is the best webinar ever. So thanks, Kelly.
Happiness is the greatest success. Where after a feeling, it's 100% in my hands.
Mhm.
You have to find a way to be happy without looking for it from someone else or some other place.
Mhm.
Happiness is the greatest revenge. So a place, and that in itself will attract more positivity and happiness. Happiness is the greatest revenge, and also happiness is the greatest success.
Mhm.
I can't wait to watch again. I love the alone is all one. Peaceful aliveness and flow state, amazing. Loved how this became so simple to conceptualize.
Mhm.
So great takeaways, everyone.
Smile, Rob. We have to take a picture.
Yeah,
Oh.
big smiles.
Oh, you get the glass back.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Really
Oh.
excited to have you join
Your
us.
Instagram handle, is it Rob Mac Official?
Yeah.
So everyone, remember, you know the drill. You are going to take the screenshot. Brad's going to toss it into Slack, unless you already took it. Some of you take some interesting shots of me in weird positions. So if you want to do that, that's also fine. But post your takeaways and tag Rob Mac Official. And here's another, like, this is, we always say this is how you train people to post takeaways about you, but like, this is a really great way to bring more happiness and more connection. If you talk about these takeaways, people are like, ooh, what is that over there? And then they're going to want to have that too. So anyways, please post your takeaways, tag Rob, tag Profitable Pilates. And thank you for being here, Rob. As always, it's so fun to see you. I'm so happy for what's going on for you. You're obviously doing all those things to attract it in. So thank you for being such a light and example for us all.
It's such an honor and pleasure and privilege to even know you two, let alone be in the conversation with you. So thank you so much. I feel truly grateful just to be connected. Keep shining.
Yeah.
Love it.
Too.
Awesome.
Thanks,
All right.
Rob. Hopefully see you soon.
Bye now.